we find it difficult to imagine how a parliament can do such a thing. And I think it's almost unique in my experience. I don't know of any other instance in the modern history of the world in which a parliament has done such a thing. I mean, maybe there have been infringements of freedom of religion, yes, all over the place, but not in the sense of actually saying that people don't belong to a religion when they say they do. It's everybody's right, particularly under the UN Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, for example, to belong to a religion and to profess their faith in the manner that they feel that they need to do that. So for a parliament to intervene like this and to stop people from doing it is bizarre and unheard of and completely irrational.
Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the last episode in the series 1974 From Democracy to Extremism. In this series we have been trying to explore the circumstances that led to the anti-Ahmadiyya amendment in the Constitution of Pakistan in 1974. Also, in the series we briefly analysed most of the important areas of discussion in the published in-camera proceedings of Pakistan's National Assembly 1974. And today we'll continue assessing the aftermath and the domestic and global impact of the anti-Ahmadiyya laws. The excuse made for bringing the Ahmadiyya issue to the Parliament in 74 was to define the status of a person who does not believe in the finality of the prophethood of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. But ironically, that fundamental question was left out from being dealt with in the cross-examination of Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad. But let's examine the role of the courts in Pakistan. A court is, as we know, an impartial forum which does not surrender to the pressure of government's wishes or public opinion. Mr. Rahman, Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
Tell us a bit about the landmark court cases. We know, of course, Abdurrahman Mubashir case you mentioned in the last show, of course, that effectively watered down 74 amendment. And also then we can talk about the post-84 as well, when Ziaul Zahiruddin case was also to the court in 1993. Tell us some brief history of these court cases, the landmark court cases.
You see, these cases, you have called them landmark cases, and they indeed are landmark cases. Abdurrahman Mubashir case and Zahiruddin case and Sharia court case, these are the three cases which have impacted the Pakistan society very greatly. Now, Abdurrahman Mubashir case, if we put them into historical perspective, Abdurrahman Mubashir case was shortly after the 1974 amendment. And it was, though the decision ultimately came in 1978, it was all going through 1977. So before the martial law was imposed, the case had been argued in the courts and the judgments had been prepared or delivered. So 1984 ordinance came much later. So there is a marked difference between the attitude and the approach of the court to the issue before 1984 and after 1984.
Right.
And that was because before 1984, courts were not under a martial law regime. Whatever they were, unfortunately in our history, our highest courts, our apex court has been always obliging the martial law dictators.
Which is Supreme Court.
Supreme Court. But the courts were by and large working on the liberal premises, and the court cases were arguing and interpreted and decided on liberal grounds, which are the basis of our law in Pakistan. So in Abdurrahman Mubashir case, the challenge was very great. The challenge was that since we are not Ahmadis are not Muslims anymore, so they cannot behave as Muslims. Our people, the team who was working, they brought about the entire history of architecture, Muslim architecture, Gothic architecture, Hindu architecture, showing what is a dome, what is a minaret, when it is a minaret built, and then said, you cannot call yourself a mosque. I said, well, in the Holy Quran, the place which had 365 idols was called as Masjid-e-Haram. and the Solomon's temple was called as a Masjid-e-Aqsa, was known as mosque. From Masjid-e-Haram to Masjid-e-Aqsa. At that time it was Solomon's temple. So even the non-Muslim places of worship, then we brought out instances from the Quran. It's a very, very, very interesting argument. So the court ultimately held that these practices in the first place, they are not exclusive for Muslims. Minarets are there in the temples, they are in the Hindu temples and in the Sikh Gurdwaras, they have all these domes and minarets. So this is nothing exclusive. And then the question was, if a practice is common between a Muslim and a non-Muslim, can you deny the non-Muslim? For example, wearing a beard is a Sikh tradition, is also a Muslim tradition.
And so the domes in Gurdwaras.
So can you ask Sikhs not to wear beard because it's a Muslim tradition? So they said, in the first place, these are not exclusive. Number two, these practices have been the Ahmadi practice for the last 100 years, and we cannot stop them. This is in accordance with Islam. And ultimately said, the argument has been made that they have been declared non-Muslim by constitution. Yes, they are non-Muslim, but of a very special kind. They are non-Muslims who believe in Quran and Sunnah and Hadith, and they want to be governed by the law of Quran and Sunnah and Hadith. And according to Quran and Sunnah and Hadith, we cannot prohibit.
So in Abdul Rahman Bashir case, law prevailed and justice prevailed.
The law prevailed and justice prevailed, and the clerics did not have the courage to take it to the Supreme Court. So there it ended. Now, and the second landmark case was the
Zahiruddin case.
The Zahiruddin case came later. It was the Sharia court.
Right.
Because some of the Ahmadi lawyers thought that Ziaul Haq is, in order to legitimize himself, he says, we will have Sharia courts. We will declare any citizen can go to the court and say this law is against Quran and Sunnah. So I said, or we said, we will go to the court and say, well, this law is clearly against Quran and Sunnah. And a very elaborate argument was built based on I had about 150 references from different tafasir of the Quran and the Muslim history saying that these things would not be practiced.
Various commentaries of the Holy Quran.
Various commentaries of the Quran. Right. So, and then in that case, we raised some very interesting questions. Can somebody stop a non-Muslim? Assuming that I am a non-Muslim, can the law or the Sharia, does law or Sharia stop a non-Muslim in believing in the unity of God? Does Sharia stop a non-Muslim from saying that the Holy Prophet Muhammad was truthful in his claim? Does the Quran and Sunnah prohibit any non-Muslim to adopt the Muslim teachings because he thinks it is a good teaching? I mean, these six questions were dictated to me by Hadhrat Khalifatul Masih, and those questions were answered in our favor. And all the arguments that we raised could not be met.
And which year was that?
It was 1984.
84, 85? 84.
Immediately it was taken into court and it was decided toward the end of 84.
So same year of the ordinance.
Same year, and then it was reported in 1985 perhaps.
Okay.
So in that case they said, well, this is all right, but the ordinance is valid because it has given effect to the constitutional fiat. Did not say the ordinance is justified by Quran and Sunnah. Not a word saying that the ordinance is justified by Quran and Sunnah. So then again...
And that's what Sharia court is saying.
That was Sharia court. So Sharia court said...
That's quite ironic. Sharia court
is very
deciding not on Sharia.
We went to the court asking them the judgment on Sharia, and they gave us a judgment on
Constitution.
On Constitution. And then again...
Right.
We clearly, I mean, I was the counsel arguing the case. One can say that you are trying to give credit to yourself. But the point is, our arguments were not met. And the court time and again told the mullahs to reply to my question which I have raised, and they did not. But ultimately, from the questioning which was going on, the exchange of questions and answers indicated that the court was being swayed by the arguments that I was making. So ultimately Ziaul Haq, now these are the facts. Ziaul Haq called the Chief Justice and the proceedings were interrupted. And when he came back, after a short while the proceedings ended, and the case was heard by 5 judges, but the judgment, brief short order was dictated by 5 judges, was signed by 5 judges, and it was announced. Shortly after I concluded my arguments, they did not even go back to consider my arguments within a short time. What did that mean? That they had been directed by Ziaul Haq to give a unanimous judgment. There was a feeling that the judgment will be a split judgment.
So all 5 judges?
All 5 judges. But right. In that brief order, they did not give any reason. They said for the reasons to be recorded later, we hold that the ordinance is valid.
And that later never came?
And that later came.
Right.
And when that later came, it was a divided judgment. How?
Right,
Because Chief Justice did not appear to agree with the other judges. So by a constitutional amendment in a devious method, if there was an amendment that a judge can be posted, transferred to any other post, and Chief Justice was transferred to the Ministry of Religious Affairs as an advisor. He said, this post is below my dignity, so he stands retired. So Chief Justice stood retired, and the detailed judgment was signed by 4 judges. There was not a word about what happened to 5th judge. What was his view? Not a word. The international community, Geneva's International Commission, went to Pakistan and they expressed their surprise. Whatever was his opinion, we are entitled to the dissenting opinion. The judgment did not even mention that it was heard by 5 judges, as if the 5th judge did not. And both these judgments are printed in Pakistan legal decision.
It sounds very much like 74 proceedings, where in fact memorandum was never mentioned.
So it was not a unanimous decision.
Right, okay.
So the point that I am making is, the decision was a split decision. Even in Sharia court, it was a split decision. I am making that point for my young lawyers to keep it in mind that the case is open. It is not a unanimous decision. It is a split decision. And all these things should be kept. Now the other case, you said another landmark, a Zahiruddin case. On the constitutional issues, the judgment has been seriously flawed and criticized by international jurists. But that judgment is again a divided judgment. The senior judge, Justice Shafiur Rahman, did not agree with the other judges. He did not validate the ordinance with a blanket cover. The other judges validated the ordinance with a blanket cover. Shafiur Rahman did not. Then Justice Salim Akhtar validated a part of the ordinance, did not validate another part of the ordinance. So it was not really a majority judgment, because Salim Akhtar has a dissenting view, Shafiur Rahman, the senior most judge, has a dissenting view, and the third judge, who has given view on a particular angle, which I need not discuss here, it's too technical. On a particular angle, he had given a different view in an earlier case. So he did not give any view in this case. So either he was neutral or he had changed his mind. It is not clear. So
how large was the bench?
5 judges.
5 judges.
So if you take out 3 judges, 2 judges giving dissenting opinion, and 1 judge remaining neutral because he had given another view.
It's half-half.
So it's half-half, then it is not a majority case. So in any case, it is a divided judgment, again a split judgment.
Even after the ordinance?
Even after the ordinance, it's a divided judgment. So that judgment, though it is final, it closes our door to our litigants on this issue, but it is still an open case because it is a divided judgment.
Thank you very much. Let's hear some independent views on the role of the courts in interpreting anti-Ahmadiyya laws.
Courts have been subdued into submission. The courts are also imbued by this sort of unbridled, though uninformed, religious fervor. By then, the courts have become almost apologists of, on the one hand, the military regime, which they remained while the military regime was there, and of, well, if you're going to institute a Shariat court, which is, Jinnah never thought of establishing a Shariat court. 73 Constitution never thought of establishing a Shariat court. Nothing to do with the context at hand. Nothing to do with, either the, as we say in law, either the holding or dicta or anything. And the use of trademark law is an interesting example. So the argument is that, Coca-Cola will not let somebody else sell their product calling it Coca-Cola. So how can Muslims let somebody else call their practices by the same name? And the tone and the language, it's not a tone and a language of a court between 2 positions. It is a polemical opinion. It is a very partisan opinion. I'm now talking about not just the holding, but just how they, for example, rhetorical questions. How can Ahmadis expect that when they say that people will keep calm? Who can blame Muslims when they lose patience if they hear this?
Pakistan, sadly, is one of the worst violators of religious freedom that we report on at USCIRF each year. And the Ahmadis are certainly one of the most persecuted communities within Pakistan. You have this, I think, uniquely bad legal targeting of a whole body and community of believers within a nation that seeks to not only disenfranchise them, but frankly seeks to strip them of what we talked about earlier, that fundamental right to identify who it is they are religiously and to live their lives in accordance with that view. And it is really disturbing, but I mean, it reveals a deep insecurity that in Pakistan, a member of the Ahmadiyya community is not permitted to also claim their obvious heritage as Muslim.
All the indicators are not too good. One hopes against hope, I must say, that okay, so now we've had this restoration of a very people-oriented court, which is so active and so interventionist that nothing escapes their vigilance. It just so happens that these types of cases escape their vigilance. A Patwari taking a bribe in Pind Dadar Khan is a matter for the Supreme Court to take judicial action. But people being lined up and gunned because of their belief, which is at some standard deviation away from whoever's norm it is, that somehow is not worthy of judicial cognizance.
Mr. Rahman, how do you see 74 Amendment responsible for spreading hate against the community outside the boundaries of Pakistan?
You see, Mahmud, I have been speaking about it earlier also. This 74 Amendment legitimized a philosophy which had been rejected in the Islamic world over last half a century, starting from Hassan al-Banna and Maulana Maudoodi and Ikhwanul Muslimin and Ibn Taymiyyah philosophy adopted by the Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. That philosophy has been legitimized by 1974, and therefore these people feel that we have now a legitimate course of action which we can adopt. So this has affected the world at large. It is no longer confined to Pakistan. So the world community or the world extremist movements have got a legitimacy from the Pakistan court.
Thank you. Now it seems that the hate has reached its pinnacle in the current times of the fifth successor of the Promised Messiah, Hazrat Mirza Masroor Ahmad. But the response by the Ahmadiyya leadership is one of peace, patience and prayer. This is the same message that Hazrat Mirza Nasir Ahmad gave after the amendment in the Constitution in 1974. But most importantly, this is the same message that the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave to the followers of his religion. Unprecedented killings of Ahmadis have been seen and the perpetrators go scot-free.
The Lahore massacre occurred on May the 28th, 2010 in Lahore, Pakistan. During the Friday prayers, 86 people were killed and more than 120 were injured in nearly simultaneous attacks against two mosques of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. After the initial attack, a hostage situation lasted for hours. Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, as well as their Punjab wing, claimed responsibility for the attacks. Perhaps unsurprisingly, the mass murderers have still not been apprehended. Atrocities such as murder, kidnapping, imprisonment, social boycott, discrimination at educational institutions and workplaces still continue.
Atif is a young member of the Ahmadiyya Muslim community. The community is subject to widespread intimidation and is banned from describing themselves as Muslims. Atif was beaten up by a mob as he was carrying the Ahmadiyya literature. He was tortured by several men at a time. He had to go through the legal process as he is a criminal in the eyes of the law. He has no right to profess, practice or preach his religion.
करीब से मुहाफ़िज़ वाले गुजरे थे पुलिस वाले तो वो मुझ पर तशद्दुद कर रहे थे तो उन्होंने पूछा कि आपके साथ क्या मसला है तो उन्हें मैंने जब ये बताया कि मेरे साथ ये मसला है मैं थोड़ी बुक्स लेके आया हूँ तो इन्होंने मुझे मार रहे हैं तो उन्होंने कहा बेटा आपका ये मामला है तो वो मुझे पुलिस स्टेशन ले गए समनाबाद पुलिस स्टेशन, वहाँ से पुलिस स्टेशन से उन्होंने मुझे मुख्तलिफ पुलिस स्टेशन मुंतकिल करते रहे। उसके बाद काफ़ी दिनों के बाद FIR दर्ज होगी और उसके बाद 10 दिन के बाद मेरे पेपर थे और मैं अदालत में मेरी पेशी थी और पेपर नहीं मैं दे पाया। पेपर भी मैंने दिए लेकिन मुझे इसका कोई अफसोस नहीं है। पेपर तो फिर भी मैं दे दूँगा लेकिन मेरा असल इम्तिहान यही है। तो इस घर वगैरह तो हमने छोड़ दिया लेकिन जमात के लिए इंशाल्लाह ताला कोई भी कुर्बानी होगी तो हम पेश करेंगे, कभी पीछे नहीं हटेंगे। इस सारे वाक़े के बाद हमें अपना घर बार छोड़ना पड़ा, लेकिन हमें इस बात मेरे वालिदैन भी मेरे साथ हैं और मुझे इस बात का कोई अफसोस नहीं, दुख नहीं है क्योंकि खलीफात वक्त की हमारे साथ दुआएं और तमाम अहमदी बाप की हमारे साथ दुआएं, तो अल्लाह ताला बेहतर करेगा।
On 29th of October 2011, I was kidnapped from my home at Kotli, Azad Kashmir, along with my 12 years old son Fahad Javed. At that time, I was serving as the Naib Amir District, Kotli, Azad Kashmir, and before that I had served for 9 years as District Amir, and I was the President of Kotli Jamaat for the last 14 years. And professionally, I was working as consultant district surgeon at Kotli District Headquarter Hospital, Kotli, Azad Kashmir.
मेरा नाम फ़हद है, मेरी एज 14 years है और 29th of October 2011 को मैं मेरे अब्बू के साथ किडनैप हो गया था। हमारे हाथ और आंखें बांध के हमें गाड़ी में डाल दिया था और उसके बाद 2 hours के बाद हम एक जंगल में पहुँचे और वहाँ पे हम यही समझ रहे थे कि अब हमें यहाँ पे मार देंगे क्योंकि बिल्कुल रात थी और कुछ भी नज़र नहीं आ रहा था। और उसके बाद वहाँ पे हम 4 hours उधर हमारी गाड़ी रुकी रही और उसके बाद फिर हमें एक ट्रक के ट्रंक में हमें डाल दिया उन्होंने, जहाँ पे कुछ भी बिल्कुल छोटी सी थी और मैं और मेरे अब्बू एक दूसरे के ऊपर थे और उसमें 2 days 2 nights और 1 day के लिए, जिस नाइट हमें अगवा किया वो वाली नाइट, फिर अगला डे और फिर अगली नाइट और फिर उससे अगले दिन हमें निकाला और इसके दौरान हमें कुछ भी खाने पीने के लिए कुछ भी नहीं दिया था और हमारी जो ट्रंक था उसके ऊपर एक और उन्होंने बहुत भारी पत्थर रख दिए ताकि हम खोल ना सकें।
We reached at our destination, which we later came to know that it was Miran Shah, a part of the northern Waziristan. And after my arrival there, they said our senior member is coming, and that was their Amir of the Taliban, and who came to me and he started speaking very rudely. And the first of all, he said to me that, "Doctor, look, we have kidnapped you solely because you are an infidel. You are a kafir in our eyes, and we are duty bound to kill you and your son, and your wealth is halal for us." And I was asked to pay a huge amount of 90 crore Pakistani rupees as a ransom. And on the 5th day, we were taken to a far-off place, and a contact was made with our family, and the demand was put forward to pay that huge amount. Otherwise, they threatened that after a couple of days, they otherwise will be killed if the money is not arranged. I requested them to provide me a Holy Quran, and they flatly refused that you, being an infidel, cannot touch the holy book of the God, and so we cannot provide the Holy Quran to you.
और फिर इसी तरह हमारे 2-1 महीने गुजर गए और उसके बाद एक दिन वो आया हमारे पास, आता रहता था वो, लेकिन एक दिन आया और उसने मुझे मेरे अब्बू से अलग कर दिया। और उस वक़्त मैं बहुत डर गया और अब्बू भी रोने वाले हो गए और उन्होंने कहा कि जाओ, जिस खुदा से लिया था उस खुदा के हवाले ही मैं आपको करता हूँ।
And at times they used to say, why are you wasting the time? What is your relation with the God? God is ours, and there is no relation. You don't have any relation with the God. After the first 1.5 months, I was contacting with my family and not my son, and I was forced not to disclose anything or any well-being of my son despite the repeated inquiry of my wife that what about Fahad. And a day came after about 2 months when they started the physical assault, severe sort of physical assault, so much so about 4 or 5 of them stood on all my 4 sides, and they started kicking me so severely that from the front sides 3 of my ribs were fractured.
ऊपर छत के साथ उल्टा लटका दिया था और फिर मुझे कोड़े उन्होंने मारे थे.
And at the same time I was whipped on that day, and at times at night they used to come and they wake me from the sleep and start whipping. And repeatedly they were asking me just to deny about the truthfulness of Ahmadiyyat and just abuse Hadhrat Imam Mehdi alayhi salam, and they will not charge anything, not even a single penny, if I just straight away refuse about the truthfulness of the Ahmadiyyat and start abusing Mirza Ghulam Ahmad Qadiani.
दरमियान वाले अरसे में जब भी उनका लीडर हमारे पास आता था तो हमें कहता था कि हमने आपको सिर्फ और सिर्फ इस वजह से अगवा किया कि आप अहमदी हो, और अगर आज ही आप अगर अहमदियत छोड़ो तो हम आपको एक भी पैसा लिए बगैर आपको हम रिलीज़ कर देंगे. और हर दफ़ा आके कहता था कि मिर्ज़ा साहब को नाउज़ुबिल्लाह गालियाँ दो और हम आपको कुछ भी नहीं कहा करेंगे. और फिर उसके बाद मेरे अब्बू और मुझे हम कहते होते थे कि ये अहमदियत ही सच्ची है और हम अहमदियत नहीं छोड़ेंगे, और फिर वो हमें मारना शुरू करता था और बहुत ज़ोर का हमें मारता था.
My son was crying, and he was crying and saying, "Oh uncle, for God's sake, don't kill my father, and don't make me orphan at such a little stage of age." And he said, "You are asking me for the sake of Allah, and we are killing him and killing you people for the gratitude and for the pleasure of Allah, because it is His command that you people like you should live no more on this earth, and we will not spare you."
तो उस वक़्त हम अल्लाह से बहुत दुआएं मांग रहे थे. तो उसके साथ हमारी गाड़ी में उस वक़्त वो उनका लीडर बैठा हुआ था, ड्राइवर, और फिर एक और तालिबान उनका बैठा हुआ था, और फिर हम 2 थे. तो वो सारे तालिबान उनका लीडर गाड़ी से 2 मिनट के लिए बाहर निकल गए बात करने के लिए कि हमें किस तरह मारना है और क्या करना है.
Just after 3 or 4 minutes, the doors of the car were opened and they came in, and for the first time in the 4 months, the leader of that, the Amir of the Taliban said that, "Can you play 10 crore instead of 90 crore? I kept silent. Then he said 5, then 2, and then at the end he said, "Well, you just," he asked them that go back to the same place where we can have a contact with his family on telephone, and tell his wives that just send that money, that was around 1 crore Pakistani rupees, to send and take both of them." And we were released on that day, on the 28th of February 2012, after a period of 4 months.
Shams Fakhri embraced the Ahmadiyya Muslim community in 2006 after undertaking the necessary theological research. His brother-in-law was martyred whilst returning from work with Mr. Fakhri on a motorbike. Mr. Fakhri was badly injured, and his limp reminds him of that night in Karachi when he was injured and his brother-in-law was target killed.
खैर हम वहाँ पर गुलस्तान जौहर चरंगी पहुँचे तो अचानक 3 तरफ से हम पे फायरिंग शुरू हो गई अचानक. इसकी वजह से ना मैंने मोटरसाइकिल को तेज़ चलाने की कोशिश की, लेकिन अचानक मेरा बिरादर निस्बती जो है ना पीछे से मोटरसाइकिल से गिर गया, जिसकी वजह से ना मुझे वापस मुड़ना पड़ा. जब मैं वापस मुड़ के आया तो मैंने उनसे कहा कि अपने बिरादर निस्बती से कि हाथ दो अपना. तो उसने कहा कि बस 2 अल्फाज बोले कि शम्स भाई मेरा दिल में गोली लगी है, और फिर ये कह के उसने कलमा पढ़ा, वो शहीद हो गया. मेरा एकदम दिल टूट गया. फिर पहले मैंने ना उनको एकदम सीधा खड़ा हो गया मैं, और मैंने उनसे कहा कि अब कोई फ़ायदा नहीं है और मारो, कितनी गोलियां मारोगे. क्योंकि ईमान का जज्बा जो है ना वो इतना बढ़ा हुआ था जिसकी वजह से ना कि मुझे उस बात का कोई वो नहीं था, मलाल नहीं था कि मेरे पर फायरिंग हुई है। मुझे सिर्फ दुख था उसका, मेरे अपने बिरादर निस्बती का, कि बेचारा बच्चे की उसकी भी शादी हुई थी और उसको एक ही हफ्ता हुआ था उसके निकाह हुआ है। अल्लाह ताला हमारे साथ है, हामिर नासिर है। और मैंने कहा जिस जमात में शामिल अल्लाह ताला ने किया है ना, इसमें सारी दुनिया की दौलत भी दे देना, जब भी उसका हक अदा नहीं होता।
We see that these flames of extremism which were ignited against the community have now engulfed everyone in Pakistan. Mr. Imam, how do you see these flames of extremism that was ignited in 1974 and now engulfing everyone, whoever resides in Pakistan?
It is continuously on the rise, and it is eating up the whole society, and the fiber of the society is destroyed. The hatred is being spread at levels which you cannot imagine. I am surprised at how the international community can sit silent over this. I saw other day a textbook of 6th class, primary school, 6th class, where hate material against the Ahmadis, and it has been in so many words said that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad claimed to be a false prophet, God forbid. So that kind of hatred is being fed into the young minds. Even if you want to teach the students your own faith, you have no right to spread hatred against the other faith. We see how in UK the religious education is imparted. They tell you something about Christianity, something about Hinduism, something about Islam, but nothing hatred, no hatred. So even if you want to educate Muslim youngsters on Muslim traditions, it does not mean that you should put in hate material into the textbook. It's a very serious matter. Right from the days when the minds are a clean slate, you are poisoning the minds of the youngsters against and then you put the Ahmadiyya youngsters into a kind of trauma. How are they going to face that hatred? So this is impossible. And any modicum of sanity which was left in the society is now washed away. Not only in this, in the schools, in the colleges, in the universities, the top scholars are eliminated from the universities and from the classes. So this just cannot go on. The hatred is now at the peak.
So what can now Pakistan do as a state to repeal these laws?
Well, I don't know. Pakistan has practically, some people say that I as a Pakistani, I am hurt when I say that Pakistan has lost its writ on its state, not to amend the law. When they talk of making some improvements in the blasphemy law, the governor is killed, point blank. A governor is killed because he had the audacity to express sympathy with the Christian.
And the governor of the most populous province of Pakistan.
And of the government in power, just because he had sympathy for the Christian girl. So same with Hindus in Shantinagar and Christians, and then in Sindh. What is happening? So the state appears to be completely helpless. The state has to remuster its strength. The state has surrendered its authority. It has abdicated in favor of the mullah. This abdication of the state in favor of the clergy has caused all the problem. The state has to reassert itself. It has to reassert in a reasonable way. I don't say there should be bloodshed, but the authority of the state should be reasserted, and the civil society and the media should help the government and the state to reassert and reassert its authority and sovereignty, because sovereignty is lost. Now there is no government in Pakistan, unfortunate as it is. I do not like to say this about my own country.
So can I then be qualified to say that international community needs to step in, or if they need to step in, then how can they repeal those laws which are not just for Ahmadis but for everyone now, to be honest,
there are different levels at which international community interferes. Now international community unfortunately works on the expediencies, the political expediencies and the alliances and the other things. If an alliance does a wrong thing, it is just ignored. So if there are alliances, so international community acting on a uniform, it is needed. And the or the persuasive apparatus of the diplomatic world needs to be put into effect to persuade Pakistan that Pakistan cannot remain in isolation from the rest of the world. It is a global village. No country can exist in isolation. So this thing the message has to go strongly to Pakistan. International communities had give up now the expediencies and delicacies. They should send a strong message, because not only Ahmadis, the Christian, the Hindus, and even some Muslim minorities, Muslim sects who are in minority, they are facing the brunt of this. Yes. And then you see now the civil society, the silent majority has now to speak up. The silent majority should no longer remain silent. And when the silent majority, the real conscience of Pakistan society, which is the silent majority, when they speak up, then the government will also get strength, and then the things might improve. Without that, there is no hope.
The country is now caught up in all kinds of crises, security, social, economic, political, to name just a few. Can the injustices embedded in the statute book be blamed for Pakistan's tragedy?
Really, what it's trying to say is there's only one kind of true Pakistani now. You have to be a Sunni Muslim, and that's the only genuine Pakistani. Before that, you know, there were even members from the Ahmadi community in the military, in all walks of life, very successful too. Judges, lawyers, all sorts of, you know, great Pakistani community leaders, and that presumably, I mean, that subsequently became much more problematic, and they faced persecution and inability to advance their careers.
That's developed to a situation in Pakistan where we see a victim community, in the case of the Ahmadis, and in the case of also of the Shia, who are now being targeted preferentially, I would say, in terms of the number of people being killed. But this was part of this mindset that developed from those ideologues, and which I think is affecting not just Pakistan, you rightly say. I mean, it's also, you get it in Bangladesh, Indonesia, in many other countries, where this same kind of ideology prevails. And you know, there's no limit to it now, even to the extent that it causes huge wars to arise in countries like Somalia or Mali, where people are set against each other on these ideological grounds.
So again, I'm reminded of Kiske ghar jayega tu sailab bala mere baat. And this is again not to minimize what to say of the Ahmadi deaths and stuff. Even the dead are not safe. I think I don't know how you can be a human being if you are not touched by when you hear news of desecration of graves. Graves which are in societies and neighborhoods for, you know, scores of years. What kind of society are we talking about? What kind of human beings are we talking about? So not to minimize that, but then now we know that it's gone beyond that. Are Hazaras Ahmadi? Are Shias Ahmadi? People being taken off of buses and their identity cards being looked at and then stood and gunned down. And again, the record is in, again, I don't think I have to enumerate all the incidences. Not one day, not one time, every single day. Somebody or the other is a target of directly the blasphemy, quote unquote, law, or just self-assumed power and right of vigilantes to cleanse the Muslim Ummah. No city is safe. Every place is Quetta now.
Once you start identifying and throwing out sections of society, you are declaring that the state is malign and not benign towards those particular people. Very rapidly, that builds a society where the state is malign towards everyone. And in a sense, that I think is what has happened in Pakistan. Yes. It's a huge tragedy.
And it's very, very sad, I think. And these are very able people. They would have been a great credit to Pakistan, its economy, and its image in the world. Pakistan is sadly, had an image for some time now of being a country which turns a blind eye to extremism.
This is not a society that can last. This is not a country that is stable. This is a deeply unstable country. And the question is, can it be improved, or is it going to disintegrate still further? It's tragic for the Ahmadiyya. It's also tragic for the Shia, for the Sufi, for the Christians, and for anyone else whom, for some reason, the state has decided is somehow out of line. That way lies complete oblivion for that nation. I don't know if it's too late, or if Pakistan can pull herself back from the precipice on which she is standing. We have massive experience of this in Europe, I'm sad to say.
Brand a whole section of their own people as not being true Pakistanis or true Muslims, I think is pretty unusual, actually, even in the Islamic world. And of course, this sort of approach was one of the reasons that East Pakistan broke off, Bengali nationalism took over, and Bangladesh was born in 1971, because this idea of a one-size-fits-all model, based on removing other cultures and other communities from being part of Pakistan, imposing just an Urdu model on the whole of Pakistan of Sunni Islam, clearly was one that secular Bangladesh, for whom the Bengali language, Bangla and so on, were very, very important. So I think you can see some of the spin-offs of this approach resulted, you might argue, in the breakup of Pakistan.
Nations make mistakes, and sometimes they then acknowledge mistakes and reverse them and repair the damage done. And I hope, I pray that happens in Pakistan. I'm skeptical that it's going to happen anytime soon. And I think every day or delay in that is a tragedy for those directly impacted, and tragedy of those who have to live in that society physically or vicariously, as we do sitting here. And I think it's a tragedy. It's a small world. A cut anywhere is a cut on all of us.
Mr. Rahman, now on a daily basis we're hearing all kinds of news about extremism, global terrorism and whatnot. Can we say, directly or indirectly, the roots are to be found in anti-Ahmadiyya laws?
I think yes, and I think both, directly and indirectly.
Right.
Directly because the anti-Ahmadiyya laws are only a cover. Under that cover, the discrimination has been legitimized. Discrimination between this section of society, Ahmadis have been singled out by name in the Ordinance 20. So these laws have really directly impacted the mind frame of the Pakistan society. And indirectly because it has given the legitimacy and cover to the international terrorism and those jihadi movements.
Thank you very much. In all this gloom that we see around us is a ray of hope. This is what every Ahmadi would say, despite being the victim of the most horrendous laws against them. The one common reason that they all give is that they have the leadership which is divinely guided.
Allah had promised to those among you who believe and do good works that He will surely make them successors in the earth, as He made successors from among those who were before them, and that He will surely establish for them their religion which He has chosen for them, and that He will surely give them in exchange security and peace after their fear. Surah Al-Nur, verse 56.
In fulfillment of this Quranic prophecy that under one leadership, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, despite extreme persecution, does not only survive, but is also prospering leaps and bounds year on year. It does not only remain itself peaceful, despite the atrocities that this community faces, but also spreads the message of peace to the corners of the earth and shows the entire world the pathway to peace through fulfilling the rights of the Creator and His creation.
The word Khilafat means successor. The task of any successor is to continue the mission and objective of the person whom he is following. And so the task of the Ahmadiyya Khilafat is to continue pursuing the peaceful objectives laid down by the founder of the Ahmadiyya community. And so, under the guidance of the institution of Khilafat, the Ahmadiyya Muslim community has continued this work for more than 100 years.
Of course, it was my first opportunity to meet His Holiness, and I absolutely had that sense of being in the presence of someone of enormous spiritual authority and enormous wisdom.
I really thank God for this wonderful man of God, that he had the vision to really speak about peace for the world, and that is really the message that really touched my heart.
The very highest standards for Muslims were established by Allah more than 1,400 years ago, so that an atmosphere of peace, love, and affection could be fostered. If any Muslim does not adhere to these teachings, it would be entirely wrong to blame the teachings. Rather, the fault would lie with the individuals. After the First World War, the second Khalifa of our community informed the world that without true justice, peace would not develop and the League of Nations would fail. Then, in 1990, when the situation in Iraq deteriorated, our fourth Khalifa warned that not only would the Arab countries suffer, but ultimately the peace of the entire world would be destroyed. Indeed, the world has since observed that both of these warnings proved entirely accurate, and today conflict continues to plague the world. For the past 4 or 5 years, I have been warning that the world stands in desperate need of peace. No one should assume that a war between any two countries will remain limited to just them or to a particular region. Rather, ultimately, it will culminate with a world war.
You understand at a profound level that promoting religious freedom is an essential building block for peace and stability here and throughout the world. In this, we are allied with His Holiness, a courageous champion of religious freedom and of peace.
Allah ilaha illallah. We truly desire religious tolerance and mutual understanding because of the beliefs we hold. The Pakistan government declared us non-Muslims or not Muslims. That is written that the Ahmadis are declared not Muslims for the purpose of law and constitution. So that means if they try to declare us non-Muslim, or according to their wordings, not Muslims, for the purpose of law and constitution. And I believe that no political power, no political party, no government has the right to decide about the faith of any person. It is the person who himself decides or herself decides which faith he is going to hold or she is going to hold.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Rahman, for being with us throughout the show, throughout the series, and we greatly appreciate on MTA's behalf.
It has been a great pleasure being with you for whatever little contribution I have been able to make. But one thing I must say, that this is a subject which needs to be elaborated more and more and more. World needs to know more about it. The things are not yet fully known to the world.
This series has been a humble effort to discuss the abhorrent amendment to the Constitution of Pakistan in 1974 through an act of Parliament, the Parliament that audaciously invented new definitions in Islam and played God, deciding upon people's faith. The history, we'll look at it with disgust. This amendment opened the floodgates for many more assaults on one's fundamental rights. But such watersheds in the history are there for a reason. They separate good from evil, virtue from vice, and light from darkness. Historians may distort history, but history is being written where it matters the most. Courts may nurture injustices, but justice will eventually prevail. We don't know how long the story will last, but every passing day is proving who is there to perish despite the backing of the law and the governments, and who is there to prevail with the help of an unseen hand. Thank you for watching the series 1974 From Democracy to Extremism. Assalamu alaikum.
दो घड़ी सब्र से काम लो साथियों, आफते जुल्मतों जोर टल जाएगी, आहे मोमिन से टकरा के तूफान का रुख पलट जाएगा, रुत बदल जाएगी। दो घड़ी सब्र से काम लो साथियों, आफते जुल्मतों जोर टल जाएगी, आहे मोमिन से टकरा के तूफान का रुख पलट जाएगा, रुत बदल जाएगी। ये दुआ ही कथा मोजिज़ा के असा साहिरों के मुकाबिल बना अजदहा, आज भी देखना मर्द हक की दुआ, शहर की नागनों को निगल जाएगी। ये दुआ ही कथा मोजिज़ा के असा साहिरों के मुकाबिल बना अजदहा, आज भी देखना मर्द हक की दुआ, शहर की नागनों को निगल जाएगी।